Evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the special council meeting of Tuesday, February 2nd at 6 p.m. As always, we are pleased to be here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The city of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We are all treaty people. We have a fairly significant agenda tonight, but since it is a special meeting, there are no additions to the agenda. So can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Councillor Stout.
So moved, Your Worship.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously, which brings us to item 3A. And I will bow to the CAO.
Bow to the CAO.
Well, cede the floor to the CAO. How about that?
Thank you very much, Mayor Stewart, members of council, members of the public that are tuned in tonight. Tonight we've got a really interesting opportunity that we're going to present to council. Obviously, we've been working on this with council for quite some time. It's a little bit of a unique approach that we're doing here tonight, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But the item speaks to council's strategic plan. Council has aggressively placed economic development as a high priority and a specific target around the tax rate and our current, the notion of getting to the 80-20 tax split with residential versus non-residential. When you took over your term, that was about 95% non-residential and 5%, reverse 95% residential and 5% non-res. Since then, council has made a number of decisions, and I'll talk about those in a second, that they've been able to switch that tax base by more than 2%. Now, that doesn't sound like a very significant number, but when you consider how fast our residential growth is in Beaumont, that represents that the non-residential tax base has actually grown 4 times that of the residential tax base. So that's not an insignificant move. What we're presenting for you tonight, again, typically these are done in camera. These types of business negotiations are done in camera. There's still a lot of confidential information that we've shared with you that we can't share with the public around the lands, around potential partners. But council made it clear when we went so far down that in-camera path that you wanted to bring it out into the public realm, and you've made most of those decisions in the public realm. So that's what we're trying to do tonight. And I'm going to pass this on to Mr. Mackin in a couple minutes here, who is going to try and share as much information as we can with the public to show what exciting opportunity this has. Now, council, in your term, you've have not been afraid to make bold decisions, again, with that aggressive economic development targets. You've implemented or approved a very streamlined land use bylaw, and we've streamlined a lot of permitting processes in an effort to promote Beaumont as a place to come to live, work, and play, if you will, but to invest in. As a result, Beaumont has been promoted both nationally and internationally as a community that fosters innovation. Now, we're building off of that, and the opportunity we present to you tonight is an example of those. Again, they talk about some of the bold decisions, the LUB being one of them. Your strategic plan is very aggressive. The fact that you've entered into this MOU with this partner, and Rob will talk a little bit more, is another bold move. The discussions we've made and the LOI we have in place about bringing tech innovators to our city, including the opportunity for 10G, are all examples of which align with what's going to be presented to you tonight. Now, as far as the process is this evening, we're going to put 2 requests for decisions in front of you. One is going to be for a capital project, which includes a land purchase, and the other is going to be for a borrowing bylaw. The timing is critical for tonight. As we've talked about, we have land transactions, contracts in place. We have extended those. Those extensions are about to expire. The MGA requires that we publicly advertise our borrowing bylaw. So in order for us to secure what has been negotiated in these current deals, we need to make a decision tonight. And we'll talk, Rob will talk a little bit more about the details of that as well. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand this over to Mr. Mackin, who will walk us through the RFD.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. And
Council, welcome to an exciting evening tonight with a significant decision in front of you, but I'm excited to present it. So as CAO Schwartz had said, Beaumont's really becoming known as a sandbox for innovation. We've got attracted the interest of a number of different opportunities, ranging from the MOU with Health City, which Council saw previous last year, to the autonomous project, to the 10 gig project that we're working through, to the plastic recycling program, which we just finished with a local entrepreneur. All of these are demonstrating our ability to work and to foster innovation in our community. And with that, it's gone beyond just the borders of Beaumont and even the Edmonton region. So we were approached by a group in late 2020, mid 2020, about a potential opportunity that was on the horizon. Knowing that Council wants a strong desire to balance the tax base, to make it more diverse, to bring that non-residential closer to that 20% target, we pursued these conversations. They specifically wanted to speak with Beaumont because they'd heard about the innovation and the initiatives we've been involved in. So this interested party, they looked at a number of potential locations in the region, and they were assessed, and ultimately Beaumont is their exclusive choice to continue discussions, and we are at this point. We have an MOU that's in place, and we have some significant commitment from them that has been passed on to date. We believe that what they would bring to Beaumont has a number of carryover benefits as well. But all of this depends on having the site. When they approached us, knowing that Council had a firm desire to diversify our tax base, bring more non-residential, we wanted to act upon that. And that's where the Beaumont Innovation Park comes. This Innovation Park really seeks to develop this opportunity where we have independent and strategically aligned partnerships, investing in Beaumont for this project and others. The Innovation Park is going to attract additional interest by firms we believe that are involved in virtual reality, artificial intelligence technology, autonomous vehicle technology, and data management. We know that these growth areas are significant for the Edmonton region and will provide jobs and opportunities, which again speaks to Council's goals, the municipal development plan's goals, as well as the Council's strategic plan specifically. The lands do not seek to develop nor compete with any commercial interest as well. Again, we know that there are a number of significant investors and projects in the city already in that commercial space. This is going to be unique. This is the Innovation Park with an anchor tenant that we are well in discussions with that we believe is a fit for Beaumont. It aligns with the strategic plan, it aligns with the growth plan, and ultimately we were attractive. And we wanted to make sure that we took this initiative and boldly brought it forward to Council. And at this point, we require the land to be able to further the discussions and to bring it to fruition. So in front of you tonight are two options which were previously discussed in camera due to the confidential and sensitive nature. However, we do want to advance, we're recommending advancing option one. If Council has any questions at this time in regards to how we move forward, please bring that forward. But I believe that in the package, we have shared with you a lot of the feedback we've heard as well that aligns to the community's desire to grow our economy, bring jobs to Beaumont, balance our economic base so we don't have to have the residential property taxes deliver the needs and meet the needs of our citizens today and tomorrow. And we believe that this type of development aligns with what the citizens are looking for. So Council, at this time, I would hand it over to you. If there's any specific questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. But please recognize that there are some elements to this which we are limited in our ability, but I will do my best to answer them and move this forward.
Thank you very much, CEO and Mr. Mackin. I really do appreciate the presentation. And as you went through it, it sort of gave me an opportunity to reflect, as I have been over the last couple of days, about the journey that's got us to this point. Mm-hmm. And so, as much as this is a very significant step we're taking tonight, it's not the final step, but it is one that if we don't take, we will not be able to continue to advance our aims. But it all goes back to the strategic plan that this council very boldly put together in our first months in office and talking about economic development and moving that needle. And then the steps to becoming a city and putting the autonomous shuttle on our streets, which attracted interest from the 10 gig, which is another item that's coming to council in the future. Attracted all the anchor tenants to us. And so it's been 3 long years of hard work by council and administration. And I do appreciate it. And so as we get going, I'm going to make the move that council approve the Beaumont Innovation Park capital project described in option 1 of the report, which requires possession of the lands on or about March 24th, 2021, and requires no further extensions to remove conditions on or before February 25th, 2021. I will make that motion. It's a significant time and I'm happy to do it. And I will open it up to questions from members of council, and then we will debate the motion. Councillor McGough-Swain, followed by Councillor Danlock, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I think Councillor Danlock may have snuck in there before me, just on the order.
Seen it the way it came up, so.
You go ahead, Bill.
Oh, thank you, Sam. Mr. Mackin, thanks for the presentation. I'm very excited about this land opportunity for a business park. When I ran for council, one of my personal mandates was to grow our business tax base and community as a whole. Our council has been very prioritized economic development as a key component in our strategic plan for Beaumont. Our economic development team under your leadership has been working very hard to tell our story and attract business to Beaumont. There's a great interest from our community in this initiative. I've had a number of people reach out to me with questions and compliments on our efforts. Your Worship, I have 2 questions at this point. Mr. Mackin, my first question revolves around transparency and informing our citizens. Can you explain why the previous discussions had to be in a camera and why we are now bringing this out to discuss in the public? Can you walk me through the process that has followed to get us to this point, if you could, please?
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Councillor Danlock. So first of all, due to a request by the proponent when they approached us, they'd asked that it maintain confidentiality, and we are bound by that, and we honor that. And this is something that is not unique in a number of opportunities like this, where site selectors or potential investors approach municipalities. There is a request to maintain some confidentiality through the process. Also, when it comes to discussing land transactions, as we know, real estate transactions quite often are negotiated between parties, and there's elements that are confidential to a point. But we do also respect and understand the need that council has, and we all believe in, and that's transparency to our citizens. And therefore, we believe at this point we are able to share enough with you in regards to the project and regards to the land requirements that are in front of you tonight. The successful proponent has really chosen Beaumont to further this opportunity, and we're exclusively working with them. And they've evaluated a number of potential sites, and they concluded that Beaumont is their ideal location for this development. And we wanted to make sure that through the process, we respected the confidentiality that was requested. But at this time, Mr. Danlock, I hope that explains the process that we've gone through. And I believe it's part of that relationship and that trust building. And I'm confident that we'll be able to share more with the citizens and with yourselves. But at this time, part of the business process is just that, is being able to share when we can, but also move things along so that we can maintain focused and deliver these types of projects.
Thank you, Mr. Mackin. That does clarify the process very nicely, how we got to this evening. My second question is respect to ownership. Why is Beaumont purchasing the land instead of a developer? How is that to our advantage for our citizens, please?
Certainly. Thank you again for the question, Mr. Danlock. So this group approached the city directly. We were well aware because of some of those other projects that I touched upon and CAO Schwartz had mentioned. And when we were approached directly, we knew that there was a desire for this council to move the needle, to diversify our tax base. And we wanted to take that opportunity and not just hope that someone else took it. We are bringing this forward. The long term and how this develops may evolve. But we believe that because of the potential, the scope, and the type of business we're looking at here, there's a number of synergistic businesses as well that could be attracted, that will find this an opportune site and an opportune project that will deliver council's goal of that diversified, more balanced tax base.
Thank you, Mr. Mackin. Thank you, Your Worship, for that motion. I am leaning favorably towards option one, as you've outlined in your motion, but I'll yield the floor to my fellow colleagues to ask some questions. I may ask a follow-up question at the very end. Thank you very much for the time.
Fair enough. Thank you, Councillor Danlock. Councillor Munkoff-Swain, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, this is an exciting day and an exciting opportunity for Beaumont. I got a few comments up front, which will shock no one. But I wanted to start with the strategy that got us here. And it's been touched on by both Mr. Schwartz and Mr. Mackin. But these potential opportunities, they don't just happen. So I want to ensure that the connection is made. As Councillor Danlock mentioned, we came into this term with a clear mandate to bring economic development into the city. Residents wanted us to bring more non-residential tax revenue, so the cost to build much needed infrastructure, such as recreation, cultural facilities, was split more evenly between residents and businesses. So some of the key steps that you've outlined, but I'll also highlight, is included restructuring the economic development team and bringing in Rob and you and your team, overhauling that regulatory planning framework, Mike, that you referenced. I think that was crucial to make investing clearer and more attractive for developers, and also partnering on those projects to show that we have that innovative spirit. All have led to this opportunity that we got here today. I also wanted to tie into the stakeholder engagement aspect of this potential opportunity. While this particular one may be coming out to the public for the first time, this wider effort has been 4 years in the making. Based on the feedback from residents, we completed an extensive engagement process for our municipal development plan a few years back, pretty early on in our term. Essentially, that is the master plan, planning document that essentially guides how we want Beaumont to develop in the future. So that MDP was a key planning framework document for us. And when we did that extensive engagement, I remember all those open houses and all the online engagement that occurred with that. We heard loud and clear that residents want a business park. They want it in the annexed lands away from residential areas. And more importantly, maybe most importantly, they did not want to see MISCU 2.0 here. They didn't want that industrial component here in Beaumont, and asked us to target light industrial technology and innovative sectors. And that feedback that we took, is crucial to how we got here today. I'd also like to highlight that, while my vote tonight, my discussion, my thinking, in order for me to do this, I need to look at purely as a land deal. And while I appreciate, Rob, all your efforts on the anchor tenant, and I'm extremely excited about that, nothing is 100%, as we've learned. So in order for me to get to yes on the motion today, I need to be comfortable that this deal, the land deal, is in the best interest of Beaumont, with or without the anchor tenant. That's the lens that I'm going to be applying on today. Obviously, anchor tenant is an unbelievable opportunity for us, but I need to make sure that this land deal is the right thing for Beaumont. I'd also like to point out that there is precedence for this recently in Beaumont. Thanks to the leadership of the previous council, including Councillors Hendricks and Barnhart, Beaumont has purchased land before. Just 5 years ago, we purchased 80 acres just in the west side of our city there for just under $5 million. And all of that opportunity there has given us a chance to now develop it the way that we want. So those 80 acres, there was no economic development or business, specific business opportunity like the one being talked about today attached to that. But their vision at the time saw the need for Beaumont to own land so we can develop it how we want. Now, fast forward 5 years, A, it's already paid off, but B, we're able to use that for services that our residents need. So these new ball diamonds, the off-leash park that we're working through is a reality because of that. So, it's been done before, and obviously I want to thank Councillor Hendricks and Barnhart for their vision to get us there. The question that I've been asking myself, though, really, and Councillor Danlock really hit on it as well, is should the city be in the land development game? So why are we doing this instead of the private sector? And Rob, you gave a good answer as well, but for me, it really comes back to, if we want to attract the businesses that we want and that our residents told us that we want to attract for this business park or this innovation park, we need to take that control. We can't simply sit back and hope for development to happen. I think, frankly, we've done that for too long in Beaumont, and part of the reason why we're so heavily reliant on residential taxes to run our city. So I really think that for us to move forward with this, we need to make sure that this land deal makes sense with or without the tenant. So my questions, Your Worship, I've got a few of them, but how I'll frame them is, initially I'm going to ask some questions around just the land deal more specifically, without the anchor tenant, and then maybe round two I'll come back in if those questions haven't been asked.
Okay.
First question, Mr. Mackin, can you just provide some clarity in terms of the location of the business park and the land in question being purchased? I recognize there is some confidentiality around that, but residents have been asking about it, and so I'm hoping you can provide just a little more background so folks can have a better understanding on that.
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Councillor Monkoff-Swain. What I can say, I can't give you the exact site and details. And again, to your point, it is because of this confidentiality that we're working under. But I can assure you that it directly aligns and supports with the MDP that Council has passed and the usage of the land. So I believe if you look at the map of Beaumont and the land uses that are identified in the municipal development plan, I can definitively state that this land we're in discussion meets the use as planned. So if I can just leave it at that.
No, I appreciate that. So one of the questions that I got was, is this even within the city limits? Do we need to look at annexation? And so the answer is no to that. We don't need to look at any further annexation. This is within our city limits, and it's within the where we've prescribed potential business park within the NDP. That's what I'm hearing from you.
You're correct.
Thank you. The next question, and I'm hoping, again, we've been briefed on this, and it's taken some time to kind of wrap our head around it, but the majority of residents are really just hearing about this for the first time. And so I'm wondering if you could just break this down and explain, why is this important to the average resident? So what does the development of a business park mean to someone who may not own a business or work in there? What does it mean for the average resident in Beaumont?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Monkoff-Swain. What this really means to the average citizen is there will be job opportunities and career opportunities here in Beaumont. To date, we've grown our non-residential tax base significantly, as Mr. Schwartz had said. However, a development of this scale and of this nature is much more than, say, typically commercial and retail businesses. This is a job creator, and the sector that we're focusing on here is very much a future-focused industry that we know aligns with the federal and even the provincial strategies right now. So for the average citizen, this gives the opportunity to have more employment within the community for their children and future generations, but also immediately it gives the extra jobs here and people coming here to be part of the business park, either working, clients, etc. There's a lot of spin-off benefit for the existing businesses here. If it's the restaurants or if it's the retail stores, this increases potential customer base of that as well. Again, at the grassroots level, this also brings in additional tax base to the citizens of Beaumont. So again, it's not so heavily weighted towards the residential sector, but it balances it. As I mentioned earlier, I believe that the use is very synergistic, and there could be a number of other businesses interested. And to date, in the closed and confidential discussions we've been having, that has come up more and more often. So to your earlier comment too around the land and less about the potential anchor and other things, I believe that there is a significant interest and need for something of this nature in the region. Beaumont is unique. We're not defined, as you said, by what is in Nisku or in the petroleum heartland and some of the other regions. Beaumont has an opportunity here, as you outlined in the municipal development plan, to really be at home for technology and innovation, but in one of the regional cities, and Beaumont is the ideal location. If you look at our age, our demographics, the education of our population, it is a fit, and I speak to that in the report.
Thank you. Maybe just a quick follow-up on that, and maybe I will dive into the specifics, because you do highlight it in the report. I wonder if you can provide, and I'm not asking you to give me a number, but it may be an order of magnitude, just to give residents some understanding around what we're actually looking at here. And in your report, you list out kind of three dollar values. So maybe if you could just speak to that and what that could potentially mean.
Certainly, and if feel free if Mr. Dollar also wants to speak to any of this, because he's much more versed at some of the impacts. But those three scenarios are simply that, Council Monkoff-Swain, that we provided. Is those scenarios are within the range of something of this scale can definitely attract for development, and so those tables show you how much that would just impact. Again, that's with the development just here at the Innovation Park. As I mentioned, there could be additional benefits with other businesses wanting to benefit from it and other growth. But those tables are meant to be examples for you to use, and they're well within the range that we are expecting.
And I appreciate that, Rob, and I maybe I'll illustrate a little bit further. The table identifies a potential in the hundreds of millions potentially, and the impact that is. Now, I know we're not trying to set numbers out here, but I just wanted you put that context in there for a reason. That we're not talking the hundreds of thousands of potential investment in the city, or even the low millions. This is significantly more than that went ahead. So thank you for that. Sorry, did you want to speak to that?
No, I believe just though, if I may, Councilor Monkoff-Swain, pardon me, just a good reference point is our current non-residential tax base at that 220 million approximately. It gives you an idea of how significant this may be in that range.
That does. Thank you. Next question. I'm not sure if it's Mr. Mackin or Mr. Dalla, but and this is more getting into the specifics of financing this. Could you explain how administration thinks that this can be paid off over time? Obviously, 10, or depending on where we go, $10 million at least anyway is a lot of money. And understanding, the first couple of years using for reserves, but ultimately, administration's recommending this because you think we're going to be able to get this investment back and then some. So could you maybe just walk us through and explain how that investment, how does Beaumont over the larger picture recoup that investment that we're looking to make here tonight?
I'll try my best to answer that question, Councillor Monkoff-Swain, and certainly Mr. Mackin or Mr. Schwartz can jump in if I've missed anything. I think ultimately there's a few options for us that we're working on that would be scenarios around how this $10 million would be paid. One, I think, basic scenario would be that ultimately the development of the business park would include some kind of tenant that would essentially be paying rent on an annual basis that would cover not only the debt servicing costs associated with the $10 million, but some additional costs that the city could potentially be incurring over those years. So in that scenario, at the end of 20 years, the debt's paid off and goes away, and the city does not have to put in any taxpayer dollars to cover that cost. And I should say, part of the negotiations in something like that would include the 2 years that we would be funding through the reserve, so that we're recouping those 2 years as well. Another scenario, though, that we've been certainly working on is I would say more of a complicated scenario where we are looking at private equity coming into the equation. Private equity would actually, in some cases, pay for the whole $10 million right up front. And so we would be able to apply those funds directly to the borrowing and get it paid off a lot sooner than the 20 years that we would potentially be borrowing for. And so those are a couple of the scenarios right at the front in terms of paying off the $10 million that we would be incurring possibly if council approves going ahead with the project.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And you know, on top of that is as Rob mentioned, the property taxes as well that come in as revenue into the city. Next question, and I'll continue with you, Mr. Dell, if you don't mind, is around the debt room. So as a CFO, you're clearly comfortable, or else you wouldn't be recommending it. But can you just provide some background on how this would impact our debt room and how it relates to our overall debt process?
Sure. You know, I guess maybe I'll step back and talk about the bigger picture here. Municipalities in the province are governed by legislation that only allows municipalities to borrow to a certain maximum. And so it's looked at in two ways. So there's the funding piece and then there's the financing piece. So the funding piece talks about our total debt limit. That total debt limit is 1.5 times our revenue. And so in the report, we talked about based on our January 1st, 2021 numbers, our approximate debt limit is around $62 million, just over $62 million, provincially legislated. The other piece of the legislation talks about servicing or the financing side of debt. And so we have a limit on the servicing costs. So these would be operating impacts associated with the borrowing. That is 0.25 times our revenue. And so again, in the report, based on our numbers at the end of the year, January 1st, 2021, our projected servicing, allowable servicing amount is just over $10 million, about $10.4 million. Again, if council did approve borrowing of about $10 million, what that does for our debt limits is on the debt limit itself, so the funding piece, it puts us to about 56.7% of our limit. Our current utilization is 56.7. A $10 million borrowing would put us to 72.8%. My apologies. On the debt servicing side, we're currently around 29.6%. The borrowing would put us at 35.5%. So still within manageable ranges, I would say. On the debt limit, so on, again, the bigger funding piece, this moving us to 72.8% is getting to the high end of the scale from my perspective. I don't think you'd want to see it any higher than around the 80%. Then you're really pushing yourself against the limit, and your flexibility in being able to deal with any urgent matters that might come up, unanticipated, unplanned, become really restricted. The fact that we're not there, if we did go to a $10 million borrowing, is a good sign for me. The servicing piece is also within reason. And then the other thing for people to consider is these numbers will gradually go down as we move throughout the future years. They'll go down because our revenue generally will increase, so our limit will be bigger. And we will also have debt falling off. And so you're going to have the numbers working in our favor both ways. So the debt limits themselves will have more room, and the current debt that we hold drops off. So again, creates more room from that perspective as well. So it puts us in a position where it's comfortable right now and manageable, and will only get better over time. And then, as council may be aware of, we also are looking at the possibility of moving this off our books sooner rather than later. So that would obviously be a benefit of around the servicing limits as well as the debt limit itself.
Thank you very much for that. And I think a good overview of that piece, and ultimately, what you're sharing with us is that we have the debt room, and we're hoping that either this anchor tenant or future tenants will help pay that off, and then some. So I appreciate that analysis. As I mentioned, I want to take the potential anchor tenant out of this, and so I'll ask a pretty direct question. And I don't know who wants to take it from administration, but given the direction and vision of this council, does administration think that this is a good idea to purchase this particular section of land at the price that we're looking at today? And would you be recommending this to Beaumont without the anchor tenant to purchase this land?
I can take that question, Councillor Monkoff-Swain. So outside of the prospective anchor tenant, we've been approached by other businesses that are looking for available land in a development of this type. So we're confident that if there is that chance, even though the risk seems very slim, and again, as I mentioned, they're exclusively focused on discussing with us and have made some significant interest and commitments, that there's still opportunities for the innovation park beyond just the anchor.
Okay, thank you for that. And so, Your Worship, I'll leave it there in terms of questions. There are a couple of options on the floor. When I look at what has been presented, I'd love for Beaumont to own the 320 acres, and we may kick ourselves in 5 years when that land value increases. But I think right now, anyway, where I'm leaning is that 160, that option that you put on the table. I think that's the more fiscally responsible way to go. I do think, whether we have the anchor tenant or not, that if we want to make a significant change in the dial, we've got to do something. And I think, based on all the conversations that have been occurring, I do think that this is the right way to go. I do look forward to hearing from my other fellow councillors tonight, and maybe jump back in on round two if there are some questions around that anchor tenant. But for now, Your Worship, I'll leave it there. Thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Those were great questions. Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Barnhart.
Yeah, thank you. What I won't do is, restate a bunch of the stuff that the fellow councillors ahead of me have said. But I do want to point out again that council's been working through this opportunity for some time, and that the residents of Beaumont are just working through the information, since the RFD was posted yesterday, February 1st, 2021. So it is a lot to process, and for that, that's just the way this went. The anchor tenant presented in the RFD is extremely exciting for Beaumont for a whole bunch of reasons that have kind of been reviewed already. And again, looking at this as a land deal, similar to Councillor Monkoff-Swain's comments, is very important. The mayor's moved option one, which speaks to 160 and not 320 acres. And I just wanted to speak to that a little bit here. As has been spoken about, the decision speaks to the need to consider current debt room. Mr. Dollar's provided, those figures to chew on, but also the project risk to Beaumont. The whole idea of a deal is not done until it's done. We know, Mr. Mackin has spoke to that, and the last question that Councillor Monkoff-Swain asked speaks to that very thing. At this time, I will support Mayor's movement of option one. I think 160 is in the best interest of Beaumont right now. I will say that entrepreneurial Steve would go for the 320 right now. In lieu of thinking ourselves just 5 years down the road, but I don't ultimately think that's the right decision that is in the best interest of Beaumont right now. We don't want to create a situation where Beaumont is unable to invest in future opportunities. And I think beyond encroaching the 80% that Mr. Dollar alluded to, I think it's almost more important that there be some room to invest in future opportunities, because we don't even know what those opportunities are going to be. So if we've used all of our debt room on this opportunity, we've foregone any opportunity at investing in future things, and we don't even know what those could be at this point. So the next thing I'd like to say is that it's important to once again point out that Beaumont is being chosen for investment. I can't stress that enough. The land purchase sets the stage for even more investment for years to come, and Mr. Mackin has spoke to that. the RFD presents a range of potential investment from 100 to 300 million. Beaumont's never seen that level of potential investment before. And let's look backwards a little bit. I walked many miles in this community, during the campaigns, and from the campaign all the way up until this year, I can't tell you how many times I've heard from residents who were concerned that years ago, investment in a hotel did not ultimately occur in Beaumont. The investment value between a hotel and this opportunity are vastly different. They're on different scales. One of the things I've been thinking about is, can you imagine the concern the residents of Beaumont would have if the city of Beaumont and council let this level of investment pass Beaumont by? And, that's one of the things that I have been coming back to as I think through, the decision making and the RFD that was presented yesterday, and just all of the things that I've been, pondering, because I go to bed pondering, I wake up pondering. That's just who I am. So I believe strongly that option one is the right thing for Beaumont to do right now. The cliche that I'm going to say right now is something that we said in, I would say we collectively, there were a whole bunch of people campaigning for council spots in Beaumont. And one of the things that was said time and time again is that you can't keep doing the same things and hope for different outcomes. It can't ring any more true than this, than this land purchase to, facilitate further investment in Beaumont. So let's move the needle together on the residential, non-residential tax ratio together. So I did prepare some questions as well. Most of them have been gone through, but what's in it for me as a resident of Beaumont, speaking to some of the debt limits, but one of the things that I would ask Mr. Mackin is, beyond the information that is included in the RFD, will there be any other further information that will be available on this deal? Or is the information that's there what there is for now? And that's kind of what, the residents have to work with.
Thank you for the question, Councilor Van Nieuwkerk. At this time, this is what we can share, and we tried to be as transparent and open as possible with the information that's in this report. But as I did mention earlier, that as things move along and progress, provided council goes forward tonight, we will come back to council and ensure that we communicate as timely and as much as possible. I just want to respect the agreements in place to make sure that we can continue on this path.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And then just a little bit further down the more information path. So as more questions arise on the details of this decision or questions on this RFD, obviously residents can reach out to members of council. But beyond that, where's the best place going to be for residents to get questions answered? Will there be any summation of what we've heard, or council notes, or those types of things that will come forward after this meeting tonight?
So I may defer also to Director Berezowski on this in communications, but we will endeavor to update FAQs and anything on the website as things do move forward. Obviously, it'll be dependent on how council goes and proceeds this evening, but we will work to make as much possible as we can through the existing means. Mr. Berezowski may want to add a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Mr. Mack, and I think you've pretty much covered it. That if council does proceed with this after this evening, there will be some information that will be available on the website. It won't be much more than what's in the RFD already, but as this progresses and more information becomes available, we will be updating that for residents.
Yeah, good. And I think I'll just conclude by saying, if you have a question, reach out to a member of council, or reach out to administration, or check on the website. The worst thing that happens in these times is speculation and hearsay. Speculation and hearsay gets nobody anywhere. There are right places to get information and the factual information, and please choose those routes. We're here to listen. Everyone is not always going to have the answers on the tip of their tongue. So be patient and seek factual information. That's all I can ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Van Nieuwkerk. Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Barnhart, and that'll bring round one to a close unless Councillor Hendricks chimes in.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Rob, for the presentation and for the details that you provided. I understand you've provided as much as you can within the constraints of the confidentiality regarding the anchor tenant. So thank you for all of that. I think this is a very momentous decision we have in front of us tonight. And I think attracting this anchor tenant will be absolutely game-changing in terms of economic development and growth, in terms of bringing commerce and business and employment into Beaumont, in terms of the knock-on effects of to other businesses and business attraction, and obviously in terms of municipal funding and tax revenues, and as has been discussed, moving the dial on that non-residential residential tax assessment split. So all, momentous, game-changing stuff, and intoxicating as it all is. So first thing, I guess, really I have to say is I want to commend you and congratulate you and the economic development team on finding these opportunities, pursuing them, bringing them to this stage of maturity, regardless of what the actual decision is tonight. I think you're to be commended for doing that. So thank you. Yeah, as intoxicating as the anchor tenant possibilities are, I agree with Councillors Markov-Swain and Van Nieuwkerk there, in that I think we have to consider that deal in terms of, is this good for Beaumont? Is this the right direction to go? And I think what we've been hearing is that it is, that there is enough interest and from other potential tenants, and that there is a real need to have a commercial development park within Beaumont on the lines that have already been discussed. So I'm comfortable with that. There is a question I'd like to ask though, and I'm not sure whether it'll be you or Mr. Dowler who's the right person to answer it. So please chime in as necessary. I just push us forward to, let me see if I can find it. Page 4 of, it's page 6 of 10, where the discussion is of the funding for the Mayor Stewart's moved option 1 already. So, and if I'm looking down on, yes, I've got the right page now, 6 of 10. If approved by council, moving forward with the Beaumont Innovation Park capital project will result in an increase 2020 capital approved budget of 11 million. Project will be financed for the partner contribution as well as 10 million in debenture borrowing. So I'm to assume then for that the anchor tenant is the partner is bringing forward the difference of $1 million. Is that correct?
Yes, if Councillor Stout, to confirm, I did mention in the report there has been a significant commitment made by the proponent, and that speaks to that.
Okay, thank you. Are you able to share with us? I'm just trying to wonder. I'm wondering what happens to that $1 million. That's about 9% of the total cost. So does the partner have a 9% stake in the business, or do they buy 9% of the land, or is there a rent or a lease agreement, or are you able to speak to that?
I'll maybe chime in on this one, Councillor Stout, and I think those are all questions that are yet to be answered. Again, the first step for us is getting some approval or not from council, and then having some further conversations with either the potential anchor tenant that we've been in some conversation with already, or with potentially others that are interested in coming on board. Any of the scenarios that you just threw out are possibilities. We're not going to preclude anything at this point in time from what the contribution means. I think at the end of the day, for the city of Beaumont, Mr. Mackin mentioned a few times when we've had conversations with council previously, first and foremost, our objective in this from the city of Beaumont's perspective is to manage and reduce the risk as much as possible. And so we will do that as best we can when we enter into those negotiations with whatever agreement and parties we do.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm counting on it. Very well, thank you. So at this point, then it's not clear whether, and again, regardless of the anchor tenant, as to whether tenants who moved into this, who developed in this commercial park, would be renting, leasing, or buying the land. There are options potentially to do any or all. Is that correct?
Yeah, at this point in time, we're not taking any of those options off the table. You know, again, we will be guided by the principle of reducing the amount of risk as much as possible to the city of Beaumont. And that could take a variety of different shapes in those agreements, but nothing's off the table at this point.
And in order to minimize that risk, you need to have a full range of options, I'm assuming.
Yeah, definitely. That would be preferred and certainly would help the negotiation process from our standpoint.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. I am very much in favor of option one as it stands at the moment. So I'll tip my hand there and cede the floor to whoever's next.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stout. And Councillor Barnhart, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, administration, for all of the absolutely great work on this. And I want to thank my council colleagues, because the amount of due diligence that has gone on regarding this very difficult, important decision has been very impressive. And a lot of my questions have been answered. I have a few remaining. As others have done, they've stated what their position is at this point. And I'm leaning in favor of approving this request, this motion. Mayor, the one that you've put forward, option A. It is I shouldn't say culmination, because I hope it's not the last opportunity, but in terms of our economic development strategy, we've been moving in this direction for a number of years. And Mr. Mackin has really shown his talent in getting us to this point. It's always been a goal of ours to move in this direction, but I again want to make sure that we've done all the due diligence that we possibly can, because we're not spending just our own money, we're spending our taxpayers' money. And I have just a few remaining questions, and I hope they're not showstoppers, but I would like to ask them. The first one is that there was a mention in the risk in the report about the regional the regional implications, and it's not really explained there, and maybe there's reasons for that. But I wonder if you could just, Mr. Mackin or Mr. Schwartz, whoever would like to answer this question, just give us some idea of what you're thinking there might be the risk and how much of a risk is it?
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Councillor Barnhart. We wanted to raise it, and I think that just speaks to the range of risks that we also want to capture, to Mr. Dowler's point, that we want to minimize that. We know that through the planning process that we are part of a larger regional entity, and we all want to be able to cooperate and collaborate there. We are confident that the lands that we are in discussion on align very well to what was always intended for those lands through all of our plans and the regional plans. So therefore, we don't foresee any concerns. But again, we wanted to raise it. It's part of risk management and making sure that we flag it, but we do everything possible to mitigate it. And I believe that the fact that the usage aligns very, very, very well with what was always intended should make that risk much more manageable.
So, Mr. Mackin, just to be clear, before the development occurs, it would need to go through the Capital Region Board, the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board, for approval. Is that correct?
Part of, yes, the planning cycle will move forward just as with any other development.
Okay. And my second question, and this is the only one I have at this moment, if for some reason the bylaw for borrowing doesn't pass, which of course any bylaw cannot pass, that's why we take them to public hearing. How do we deal with that? And I guess is that a question for Mr. Dowell, or perhaps does the proposal live or die on whether or not we have that Devonshire bylaw passed?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Barnhart. You know, I think the honest short answer is it does. there aren't a lot of other options on the table for us at this point in time. We've had conversations with some private equity folks. You know, the amount of energy that takes to get across the finish line. You know, I think what we would probably have to do is look at taking this current purchase of land off the table and look for some alternatives to move the project forward from a financing standpoint. I think, you know, $10 million is too much to go back to the current capital budget and try and rework things. You know, the only other obvious possibility is reserves, and from my perspective, that's not a recommendation I don't think administration would come forward with. So I think, yeah, ultimately, if the borrowing bylaw didn't get approved, then we are looking at not moving forward with this transaction.
Mr. Dollar, then I'm concerned that we don't have that written into motion 1, into the first recommendation. Should we not be saying it's conditional upon that?
Technically speaking, it wouldn't be conditional, Councillor Barnhart. But I think if what transpires and council approves motion 1 and 2 in this report, and for whatever reason the bylaw doesn't get approved, we would come back to council and either propose different funding or cancel the project.
Okay, Mr. Dollar, I mean, I just wondered whether the mayor wanted to make it conditional or not in terms of his movement ahead, because it seems to me that that's what we are saying. Well, that's what I'm saying or feeling right now, that if we didn't have the ability to borrow those dollars, I don't think I could support it at this point.
Yeah, no, fair enough, Councilor Barnhart. I sort of agree where you're coming, but I sort of I take comfort in Mr. Dollar's comments there that if for some reason that borrowing bylaw did pass, it would come back as a request for decision to either cancel the project or alternate funding. So not having the borrowing bylaw referenced in the motion doesn't give me great pause right now. So I think I'd leave the motion as is.
Okay, I'll think on that one. Thank you very much for the information.
Okay. Councillor Hendricks. You're on mute, Councillor.
There we go. So thank you. Again, thank you very much for the conversation this evening. I think it's been very informative for those who are listening in. Certainly educational to how we've gotten here, and certainly sort of a culmination of all the conversations we've had and the multiple meetings we've had to get us to this point. So fantastic. Part of the framework of this conversation and other discussions has been around documents. And to Mr. Mackin, if he could just explain the documents that we're being guided by currently with respect to this deal. I'm not saying get into the inertia or the minutia, sorry, of it. What are the documents that are framing this whole guiding principles with respect to this report?
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Councillor Hendricks. So I think if we go back to the council strategic plan for this term, it clearly highlighted the desire and the want to diversify the tax base and also the alignment with this type of use. If we look at the municipal development plan, which again is an overarching long-term document, it speaks to this. We also then look at the economic development framework, which was presented and approved by council in 2018. It highlights in a number of places within that document the fact that a business park unique in nature that doesn't align or doesn't try to copy others in the region is an ideal fit for Beaumont, and the ability to work with innovative and technology-focused companies. It's highlighted in a few places within that framework. And then also, if you look at the land use bylaw even that was recently approved by council, there's some of the use and the types of development that are outlined in that general land use that will speak to this type of development that we're working on here, Councillor Hendricks. So I believe that there's a lot of history behind this type of project within council's current mandate, but then even broader, when you look at the regional discussions, our MDP played clearly into that as well.
And using the acronyms, the MDP, we're now we're now under an MOU. Perhaps just a quick conversation about MOU, please.
Certainly. So a memorandum of understanding, it's really in place to speak how our discussions will progress, how the relationship will develop. Obviously, an MOU is sort of a typical type arrangement or an agreement in business, but in this case, it's outlining sort of our relationship as it develops and our rules of play at a high level.
And if I can, one more acronym, just for the public, is the NDA, please.
Sorry, the non-disclosure agreement. So that speaks to elements of the business transaction that have been asked to be held confidential until a certain time.
Yes, and they're gripped by way of legal process, and they're also seen as a proper way of doing business under the Municipal Government Act, the MGA, right? So thank you.
Most definitely. Thank you, Councillor Hendricks, for the acronyms.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Yeah, I get caught in acronym mumbo jumbo too. I do appreciate the comments from members of council this evening, and it's been a great discussion so far. And so I'm just going to throw in my last 2 cents to close out round 1 before we see if there's enough room if there's any appetite in going for round 2. I had to smile when entrepreneur Steve brought his comments forth, because I'll be honest, my thinking sort of mirrors his. If entrepreneurial John would definitely go for option 2, but unfortunately, and it just doesn't make any sense as a municipality. But option 1, getting the 160 with the anchor tenant and the interest we have from other entities that want to come in and invest in Beaumont and grow in Beaumont makes absolute and complete total sense. So I am going to ask my colleagues to support the motion tonight, and the second one following up after this, to move this forward. And so I won't repeat a lot of what's been said tonight. I'll keep it short. I don't think we need to do that. But I will now open it up for a quick go on round 2, and then we'll call the question. I see one councillor, Councillor Monkoff-Swain.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And I, as I mentioned, I focused my comments and questions around whether this made sense with or without the anchor tenant. I did want to speak to that potential opportunity as it relates to that. And I'm incredibly excited. The accolades have certainly been put forward to administration for fighting so hard to get this potential opportunity. There are many municipalities who were fighting for this and would have loved this opportunity, and it speaks volumes that they've chosen to get into exclusive conversations with us. So I'm super excited and hope that we can pull through with this. I guess the obvious question that residents are asking is who is this? And I know you're not going to give me that answer tonight. So the next question is, when do we think that this deal will kind of go through from their end? Are we talking, are we talking weeks? Are we talking months? Are we talking years? Just give us some context on. I'm asking you to get your crystal ball out here, but just provide some overview. I know there's so many things at play, but I want to give comfort that to residents that once everything works through on their end, that they're excited to be in Beaumont and want to share their story and vision. Could you speak to that, please, Rob?
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Councillor Monkoff-Swain. I don't want to speak for another party, to be honest, as far as the exact timing, but we're not talking years, and they're motivated. There's a sense of momentum amongst them and our discussions. But I believe the other thing is if this advances tonight, it also allows us the opportunity to also find complementary, and as I said, some of those synergistic opportunities as well, that we've had discussions on, but not quite as openly and frankly as we may be able to once we have this decision from council. So in regards to the proponent, not my place to speak, but I believe that it's not the outside like he'd suggested.
Well done, Rob. Expertly negotiated there. So I think it's fair to say that once if that finalizes and they're able to come forward and confirm this, we'll move pretty quickly into action to try and parlay this into other opportunities. Is that a fair comment? And yeah, is that a fair comment?
Yes, it is, Councillor Malkoff-Swain.
Okay, awesome. Well, I thank you again for this, Your Worship. I absolutely support the motion. I wish administration the best of luck to bring this forward. Hopefully sooner rather than later, but I'll leave that with you guys. But I absolutely am supportive of this and cannot wait for this level of development to come into the city of Beaumont. And it's an absolute step change for us in terms of our non-residential tax base, and I'm just absolutely pumped on that. So that's all for me on this one, Your Worship. Appreciate it.
Appreciate that. Councillor Danluck in under the wire. If other councillors are going to wish to speak on round two, I'd ask you to get your hands up because I'd really like to call this question. Councillor Danluck.
Thank you, Mayor Sturge. A brief clarification, if I could, Mr. Dowler. On page 2 of the RFD, it talks about the projected assessments. In the paragraph above, it says currently where non-residential is roughly 7%, 93% is residential tax base. So in the 3 examples shown there, 100 million, 200 million, 300 million, pardon me, the implications to increase tax revenue is to the right side of that page. Could you just clarify that would the 7% non-residential jump to 14 at the $100 million development? Is that what that chart really says? If you could clarify that briefly, if you could, please.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Daniluk. So the chart that you're referencing on page 2 is intended to show two different percentages.
Right.
So the first column after the non-residential assessment numbers, so percentage of total city assessment, is really intended to show where we currently are at with regards to our non-residential assessment versus residential. So that's the 8%. So currently today, our split on assessment between non-res and res would be 8% non-residential, 92% residential.
Right.
The next column over looks at it from a different view, which is based on revenue. And to be very clear, this is operating revenue or taxation revenue. So 10% of our current taxation revenue comes from non-residential ratepayers. 90% comes from our residential ratepayers. And then the rest of the table, as you mentioned, shows you different scenarios based on the level of investment on the non-res side. So you will see shifts in not only your assessment, but also in your taxation revenue. And to be clear again, that's all things being equal. So that doesn't necessarily consider any other factors that may change between now and when some of that non-residential assessment may come online. You can see values drop on the assessment side. You could see more residential development. So that's everything else being equal as of today.
Perfect. Thank you very much. One last comment, Mayor Stewart.
Sure.
As Councilman Newkirk mentioned, you can't do the same thing over and over again and for the same result. That's a very good way of looking at this whole thing with economic development. This is a bold initiative. It takes courage to be bold and do something different. That's what Beaumont's been doing the last 3 years to get us to this point. So I also applaud administration and the work they've done to get us here. I'm looking forward to supporting your motion when you call the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And seeing no further requests to speak, we will bring round 2 to a close and call the question. So once again, the council approved the Beaumont Innovation Park capital project described in option 1 of the report, which acquires possession of the lands on or about March 24, 2021, and it requires no further extensions to remove conditions on or before February 25th, 2021. So that's option 1, the 160 acres. All in favor, raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That carries unanimously. Those opposed, just to be sure. All right, so we have a second motion as part of this RFD and I will move that council approve an increase in expenditures of $11 million to the 2021 capital budget for the Beaumont Innovation Park capital project to be funded with $10 million in debt financing and $1 million from partner contributions. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That carries unanimously. Appreciate that. Which brings us to, we've now been sitting for an hour and 10, and I do know that with the next agenda item on the rec facilities that there's a late email that, so we'll take a 10-minute break at this point and allow council to have a quick look at that before we come back and get up and stretch our legs. Once again, I'd like to thank council and administration for this great discussion tonight. Spent an hour and 10 minutes really going through what is a very pivotal decision for our community, and I think it was the right one to do. And I thank council and administration for your time on this one this evening. So with that said, before we move on to 3B, we'll take a quick 10-minute break so that council can have a quick look at that RFD, and then we'll move on to recreation facility update. So. Call the meeting back to order, which brings us to item 3B, recreational facility update. Is that going to be the CAO or Mr. Suter?
Mr. Suter.
Mr. Suter.
That'll be me. Good evening, council. I'll start off by apologizing for the late background document that you would have received prior to the break. Some of that stems from my inability to type, but mainly from us hanging on to the end of day, basically, to try and get some clarity, if we could, on some decisions that we were hoping we would hear back from. I will share a little bit right now. In our world at the moment, every time there's a public health order change, revision, or a new one, we take time to analyze it, look at it, try to make sense of what the intention is, as well as what the rules actually say. And sometimes that is immediate when it is clear, and other times it's not so much. So tonight we wanted to bring 1 or 2 recommendations to council that were both at least as informed as we can be, if you will, under the circumstances, so that we weren't coming back to you in a day or two to try to reverse something and go the other direction, or pile on with a bunch more recommendations. So apologize again for the late information. You didn't have a lot of time to go over it, but I can kind of walk through slowly here, and hopefully you can give administration some direction on where to go forward. Again, mainly inconsistency we've been dealing with, but we think we've captured what is a good, or what in this case 2 good recommendations for Beaumont. We would be seeking 1 recommendation tonight would be to remove 1 sheet of ice at the Ken Nickel Recreation Center. And the second recommendation for consideration would be to open the Beaumont Sport and Rec Center for school programming. Just the background on all this would be, we've been operating under a public health order since December 13th, which closed community centers and recreation businesses, arenas, pools, curling rinks, dance studios, those sort of places. That order was in effect till January 21st of 2021. And since that date, that was extended indefinitely. So of course, we've been closed at BSRC, Ken Nickel Rec Center, and the community center. I was last before council to speak to this matter on January 12th, 21. And at that time, the direction was retain the ice surfaces, all 3 surfaces, 2 at Ken Nickel and 1 at the BSRC. It was a prudent and cautious maneuver, one that was fairly consistent with both our regional partners and many others throughout the province, with the thought being at that time that we would be prepared for rapidly reopening should we be allowed to, for our user groups that would be using mainly those ice sheets, or at the BSRC more than just the ice sheets, for example. We have done some cost saving measures in the interim, which I went over last time with council, with just some mechanical things we've done, as well as the unfortunate staff implications that fell in December 10th to be exact. And we've been kind of running the facilities, just keeping the lights on where we can, the rest, and making sure they're clean, and ready to go whenever the word comes, should it come. We're doing the best we can there to save on expenses. We all know we're generating zero revenue at the moment, being closed, and that's all we have been able to do to reduce costs up till this point. There was a question and answer that I got some copies through the province from January 19th, which seemed to signal where we were going with respect to any sort of reopening. And it spoke mainly to skating, for example, which affects the conversation tonight with arenas. Mainly when the opening would come, it would probably go to some sort of recreational skating first with properly distanced users. That seemed to signal the indoor large groups, the minor hockeys, the ringettes, the figure skating groups, organized sport, for example, would most likely then not be first in line in any reopening. And that would, of course, then push out any resumption of their seasons for this winter beyond the normal timeline, which would be the end of March, before the ice typically comes out and we turn over operations into the dry operations for other user groups who come into the buildings for those pads. These questions that we're looking at tonight, these recommendations, are all basically centered around service delivery. We don't have a crystal ball. We've been sort of hanging on and waiting like most others around. There has been a smattering of smaller communities, and probably more now today, that have been already taking the ice out or in the process of doing so, or in the process of going to their councils right now to ask the same sort of support. Mainly because the smaller ones just have no ability to generate revenue any other way, even if they could open part of their building, because they may just be an arena, for example. As at the end of day today, we did find out that Hockey Alberta has made the decision, the tough decision, I would say, to cancel this season. I know that they're still having conversations with with the associations about how a resumption to play could be in a different form. Mainly, I'm thinking practice at this point. I don't know what that looks like. They're still looking at that. But when the province announced on January 26th, the relaunch in the phases that we saw, phase 1 did not include the minor hockeys, the ringettes, the youth team group sports. That phase 1 at best case would be 3 weeks, which pushes us out to March 1st. End of season, normal season is end of March. And I think the writing was on the wall for everybody at that point. The only thing that has given us some pause here with the phase 1 relaunch is that the province is allowing schools as part of their physical education program to continue that, including using off-site locations. I can't speak to what all the off-site locations would be in other communities, but in Beaumont, off-site locations for the schools that we have would be typically Ken Nickel for a program, as well as the BSRC for one other program that I'm aware of, not to mention other rentals that they would come in for the gym, the field house, swimming lessons, and as well as potentially our climbing wall. There's a lot of stuff we're not clear with the schools right now as to what COVID-19 protocols they have to meet through Alberta Health. The health inspector would not permit them to come into our building until they meet those protocols. We were told that today. And we also don't know what the demand is. So the first recommendation this evening would be that we take out 1 sheet of ice at the Ken Nickel, retain the other in case any of our large groups are able to make use of that ice for the month of March, in which case we would be open to that conversation. Again, don't know if that's even a possibility. And that council would consider opening the Beaumont Sport and Rec Complex for school programming only. And what that means was just during school hours. And what that does for us is that enables us to keep costs where they are today. We would not incur really any additional costs. There's the potential for some small revenue for rentals if the schools are permitted to use some of our building. We would be able to operate with just the full-time staff that we have now at the BSRC without having to recall anyone at this time. If we go outside of the regular school hours, then your costs may have to go up to operate because you're having to bring in more staff. I think, Council, that's kind of my wrap on the background on everything and the recommendations. And I'll turn it back to your worship for any questions.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Just before we get into moving motions, I guess we'll have some questions because the answers to the questions will depend on the motion. So my first question is, have we talked to, sorry, this is coming sort of late. So we know that organized youth sports is minimum March 1st because the restrictions don't relax until February the 8th. And then the next step is a minimum of 3 weeks long. And then adult sport is in the next stage after that, which is 6 weeks away or 7 weeks away if you count this week. So I guess my question is have we talked to the curling rink? Are they planning to suspend or keep their season going?
Their season, your worship, would end at the same time as we shut the plant off at Ken Nickel. So if that's today, tomorrow, or end of March, that would be the case. They would not fall in, their adult sport would not fall into at least phase 2, looks like. So that still puts them out to March, and that the best they could ever operate would be several weeks there, I would imagine. We have spoke to them. Curling Alberta has canceled any season as far as any competitive play. So I don't know what any kind of relaunch would look like for them if they're able to do anything there. So the impact would be around if we turned off rink 1, for example, at Ken Nickel, then their season, we'd be taking the ice out there as well. Yes. They're much aware of that. To answer your question, they are aware of that. Yes. Okay.
And I know that from previous reports that we've had on this issue that for 2 weeks, we wouldn't really want to take it out, but for anything longer, it might be worthwhile. Knowing that we have 4 weeks minimum before other user groups, do we really need 2 sheets of ice to take care of the current school groups, or will one do? And would it make economic sense to pull a sheet and then put a sheet back in March if it was necessary?
I'll try and answer that, your worship. I don't believe the schools would be the exclusive use of that. The reason I'm suggesting keeping 2 in is to cover off should our minor hockey, ringette, for example, figure skating, be able to make use of that ice for a 1 month period potentially. That would be the most they would really be able to make use of it.
And would it make economic sense knowing that if we have to put it in for March 1st, pull it out for 3 weeks, save the utility costs and put it back in? Or does it make more sense to leave it in from an economic standpoint?
I would suggest, your worship, it makes more sense to leave it as is for now than to take it out and then remake it again. It's kind of a week to get it out, a week to get it back in.
Okay. Might have one more question, but we'll move to questions from members of council. Councillor Hendricks.
Hi, your worship. Thank you. I'll start with the BRAC 1, Ken Nickel 1 renovations and just how that plays into the mix of what's happening today.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Hendricks. It's not factoring into any of these recommendations at this time.
Okay, so it's no impact at all. Okay, thank you. Then the next question I'd have is, we're talking to the user groups. We're seeing that Hockey Alberta, I believe, has just pulled the pin on their season. Can we get some real-time answers from people that on the practical side? What are you doing? You know, does any of this make sense? Do we talk to the schools? What are you doing? Does any of this make sense? You know, happy to collaborate with them, but they got to also tell us what their thoughts are. I'm given the information today. You know, I've got an email today regarding adult men's, and they've just decided that that's all going to just shutter down as a result of, even if you get open, there's going to be multiple restrictions attached to it, and all those restrictions. It's interesting that the restrictions are also tied to whether or not you want people around the COVID situation that could bring it home, right? So now they're dropping out of recreational sports and everything else because they just don't want to bring it home. So wouldn't hurt just to reach out, I think, and see if we can't get some real intel on where we're at, and maybe we're down to 1 sheet that could cover it all off. I don't know. So
I can try and answer that, Councillor Hendricks. We have had a lot of communication, including effective yesterday morning, first thing. They were inquiring when we were going to be open next Monday, February 8th, for their hockey program, for example, through Black Gold. So they're very much interested and keen to get back on into the building if at all possible. I don't know what anyone else's resumption could ever look like if they're allowed to, and how much use the schools will make of it. It's still unclear at this time. You're right. There's a lot of protocols they're going to have to get through to get that approval. And I can't speak this evening whether they're going to get that at all.
Yeah, that's why, given the late notice of the information from our friends, the province, we're still left with more questions than answers. And to be fair to you, Paul, can't settle that with you tonight, given that you just don't have all the intel. So maybe we're 1 week away from yet another council meeting and another conversation about where we're at, and maybe have that time to find out from others where they're heading with their seasons and what the real outcome is going to be. So.
Okay. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, good comments from Councillor Hendricks there. I don't know that there's any more information that we're going to be able to glean out of Mr. Suter tonight. He's put forward everything he knows. The rest of his crystal ball is dusty, and probably half of it's going to be broken here in another month after what he's dealing with. So what I want to comment on is that municipalities are continually getting strung along. 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, 3 weeks there, 2 weeks there, 3 weeks there. Some of the smaller municipalities have just, as Paul had said, they're done. They're pulling ice out, and 2 weeks here, 3 weeks there, and it's just it's chomping at the financial bit for municipalities, and everyone is lacking information from the province. There are inconsistencies in the information that's coming. Things are coming late. There are questions that are being asked, and there's answers supposed to be forthcoming, and they're not showing up. There's more questions than answers, and people are getting fed up. So I want to acknowledge that, because I think it's important that someone say it, and so I'm doing it. So one further question for Mr. Suter on the Black Gold usage. Historically, are they using one or both sheets at the Ken Nickel, or were they making their way down to the BSRC? I don't know
that. The hockey program, for example, I believe they use 5 hours of ice time 3 times a week.
At which?
At Ken Nickel.
At Ken Nickel. Okay, cool. And so that also plays into the keeping a sheet at Ken Nickel alive, for that.
Councillor Van Newkirk, my recommendation this evening would actually be not to do that. It would be to have everybody go to the BSRC.
Oh, okay.
That way we only have to open the one building at most, because we have to then staff up again at Ken Nickel if we were to open that.
Gotcha. Okay, to close one sheet of ice, as in the other one's already not there. So
take one out and keep one just in case we would need it. That's just my cautious recommendation, in case we could rent it out the whole month of March. Not to remove both of them, just retain one at Ken Nickel, but don't use it right now.
Okay, I'm rereading here that council direct administration to close one sheet at Ken Nickel and open the BSRC for school programming. Okay, so what is yet to be determined then would be the impact of this decision on the schools, because the information is just so close. Or have you been able to have that discussion?
Which discussion, sorry?
Of traveling over to the BSRC versus Ken Nickel. Presumably they're already in a vehicle, so.
We haven't had that discussion this week yet, as of this evening. However, we did have a discussion with them back in December or November, I believe it was, when the measures were first starting to kick in, as to potentially looking at that scenario.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Thank you for the information.
Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Barnhart.
Sorry, couldn't unmute myself there for a moment. Thank you, Worship. Mr. Suter, or through you, Worship, Mr. Suter, I'm just wondering if we're going far enough taking one ice sheet out of the Ken Nickel, if maybe the chances of actually using either of them seem to me quite remote now. But I guess you've already addressed that in terms of your assessment is there might be a chance of getting a month out of one of them. But if the rationale is reducing costs, I wonder if we should just bite the bullet now and take them both out.
I hate to throw the crystal ball analogy back out. Could we operate with just one sheet, Councillor Stout? Potentially. We just don't know how much demand there'll be through schools, as well as should anybody else, any other user group be allowed to resume, then it's foreseeable that one sheet would not be enough for the month of March, for example. So that's why it's just sort of a very cautious approach. It's measured, it's reducing some costs by being realistic with the timelines, but still retaining that little bit of flexibility for us. But again, it's council, and it's whatever council wishes to do. It's really a service delivery question at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Souter, you have a tough job here. Really tough. Made it even more tough with COVID. It was tough enough with all of the new facilities and programs you brought on. I'm not sure you were able to answer the idea that Councillor Hendricks put on the table. Is there a real downside to waiting another week? And what would that be?
Councillor Barnhart, downside, just the cost of running another sheet of ice for another week. That's our downside at the moment.
And is it the $750 for the 3 sheets or just for the 1?
That's an estimate of $750 for the 3 per day.
So we're talking 7 times $750. Are there other considerations that we're not aware of? Are you talking staffing considerations? Are there? I know disappointment of the users for sure. I mean, that's hard to put a price tag on that. But just in terms of the cost, is the $5,000 or what that might come to worth taking the week to find out what the schools are going to do?
I don't think those are really linked. I think the reality is there's only so much use they're going to be able to make use of it. And I think that's why we would recommend just removing the 1 sheet. It really wasn't, that $5,000 is not insignificant, but in the big picture, it's not that much money. We know that. It's more just, we could take both out and say we have to use the BSRC sheet, for example. But I'm just a little leery until we know a little more as the next days to week unfold, and that maybe there will be much more demand for ice than when we know right now, assuming anyone is allowed to use it. And that's why I'm just being cautious. And I don't know if I can answer that question. I'm just making the best recommendation with what we know at the time.
Can you see any downside to not closing 2 at Ken Nickel? Is there a real cost consideration of getting them back up again that we don't have in front of us in terms of the dollar cost there?
Oh, I would recommend and suggest that if we take a sheet of ice out, we do not make it again this year, not till next season.
So that's reluctance to take it out, because once it's out, it's out.
Correct.
Okay. One last question is, what's the last month that we can have ice in there before other sports get in there? Is it June, July? Like, when does lacrosse go in there?
They go in as soon as the ice is out in April. So ice goes out end of March, and then clean up, and then they start right away in April.
There's a maximum 2 months we're looking at here that they can, but that's 2 months that they didn't have if we take it out. Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Souter.
Well, considering they probably won't be in till March.
Right.
So they get a month, yeah.
Month.
Councillor McGuswing.
Just very briefly, it's a little off topic. I know we're talking really about ice here, but I did get a resident who reached out inquiring about the gym at the BSRC and whether we can open that up. The provincial restrictions have decreased a little bit around gyms. So has there been any thought from the administration on potentially opening up that gym?
Thank you for the question, Councilor Marcos. When you say gym, I think of gymnasium. I think you're meaning fitness center.
Sorry, my Kiwi background, yeah, the fitness center, and I'm obviously very foreign to an actual fitness center myself. So yeah, and the BSRC.
Well, currently that is closed, and that would be a separate piece. I don't believe the order addresses that fitness center inside a rec center being able to open right now. So the only thing that would be potential would be a school program.
So I guess the residents asking, hey, some private gyms can open up. Has the city considered opening up the one in the BSRC? and totally fair to punt the question for down the road. I just figured it was in front of us here, so I'd ask.
Yeah, we are evaluating all the nuances of that order to see, because it's still some uncertainty on what can open and what can't, as far as training, for example. I think the intention is it's supposed to be private fitness centers, private gyms, more than rec centers, because as we know, rec centers are closed right now. That has not changed, other than the potential to open for possible school offsite program.
Yeah. Everything I have, everything you put in front of me here, I agree with the recommendation. We want to give as much opportunity for the school program to be able to use as possible. So I agree with your measured approach at $750 a day. I think you've got down the bottom there. So I'm good with that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further requests to speak, I think it's time to put a motion on the floor. I think I'll be honest with you guys. I think I'm going to split this one into two, because I'm struggling with the ice question a little bit. So I'm going to make the first motion that council direct administration to open the Beaumont Sport and Recreation Center for school programming, and then we'll talk about the ice, because I want some feedback from members of council. So discussion on the motion. Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Councillor Danlock, who is currently joining us by phone due to technical difficulties. Do we have him?
It's showing that he's on mute, so I'm not sure how we take him off, or if we can.
Thank you, Mayor. We're not able to take him off mute. I have asked him to unmute himself.
Okay, he just texted me. He's voted yes to this. I'm not sure that's legal, but we got technology working. Okay, so that carries unanimously. Now I'm struggling with the ice, because part of me says rip the Band-Aid off and pull it all out. Part of me says go with administration's recommendation and then have another discussion on the second sheet of ice after a week of gathering more intel. Or a third is just hold it straight off, hold the whole decision on the ice off for another week, and then have this discussion after administration's gathered some more intelligence on potential user groups. Because I don't want to see anybody lose out on the ability to use the ice and get out there and be active. But I'm tired of a death by 1,000 cuts, and $750 a day is $750 a day. So I will leave it up to members of council for their thoughts, or I'll make a motion. Or if a member of council has a motion to make, that'd be great. Councillor Hendricks.
Your worship, we've come down this painful trip and ladder as long as we have, for the hopes of others who still want to use these facilities the way they're designed. And I'd be happy just to hang in there for one more week, sink or swim, up or down, next council meeting. And then we'll have heard from all. We've gone as far as we've gone. And I think that'll be our make or break day on what to do next. Given that we just got this information, Hockey Alberta just is laid out their scenarios. The adult groups need to say hello or goodbye. Everybody needs to have some comment about the current restructuring of this rephasing. And I think, 7 days gets us there. And then we've done our due diligence and we haven't pulled it too early. But then we've also gone as far as we can go. So.
Okay, so we'll accept your motion to defer the decision on the ice to the next council meeting next week. Will that give you some time, Mr. Studer, to do a little more intelligence gathering and bring her back?
Thank you, Worship. We will do the best we can and see what more we can glean. I'm not sure we'll get anything further than what we know right now, but we might be able to determine a bit more school use, which might help us. So yes, we'll do what we can.
All right, so motion on the floor is to defer the ice decision till next week. Discussion on the motion. All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Councillor Danlock, can you come off mute or? Isn't technology grand? All right, so we'll give Councillor Danlick a couple more seconds and then we will consider him to have abstained due to technology. Oh, there we go. Councillor Danlick votes in favor. All right, so that carries unanimously, which brings us to item 4. Before I move on, let's wrap that up. Thank you very much. This is always a tough conversation because we want to keep the residents in our community active, and we do really want to not. But I agree with Councillor Hendricks. There's got to be a drop dead date in the sand where we got to make some decisions. Which brings us to item 4A, Bylaw 998-21, Beaumont Innovation Park Borrowing Bylaw, first reading, which will put this whole thing into process. Mr. Dowler.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As council discussed earlier this evening with item 3A, and went ahead and approved the motions that were recommended from administration. Before council at this point is Bylaw 998-21, Beaumont Innovation Park, first reading. And so more of an administrative step at this point in time. In front of council is the first reading of the borrowing bylaw. Again, the amount that administration would be borrowing up to is $10 million if required, at no more than, I believe it was 8%. And that certainly is not the rate that we would be borrowing at. It's more close to 2% at this point in time for 20 years. In terms of financial impacts, again, just to reiterate, based on the approved motion, the amount, of course, $10 million, the debt servicing on an annual basis is approximately $610,500 on an annual basis for the operating budget. If the bylaw does get approved, we will be bringing forward or bringing back to council as part of the operating budget update sometime in April, some budget adjustments to the operating budget that would see the $610,000 expense built into the budget. That would be offset, or what would be recommended by administration would have that cost offset by a transfer from reserve, the economic development reserve of the exact same amount. So there would be a net impact of 0 on the tax levy for 2021 as well as 2022. And again, this bylaw pushes the limits to 72.8 for our debt limit. And then on the debt servicing side of the equation, it would push it to 35.5% used. And with that, be happy to answer any questions council may have at this point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dowler. I know we did cover some of this back in item 3A, but is there a member of council willing to move first reading this evening? Nobody's biting. Councillor Van Newkirk. Otherwise, I'll do it. Councillor Van Newkirk moves that council give first reading to bylaw 998-21 Beaumont Innovation Park bylaw. Questions on the bylaw? A reminder, this is first reading. We should refrain from debate. So questions? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously because Councillor Danlick voted. And first reading is passed. Whew. Which brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you. Once again, I'd like to thank council and administration for tonight. It was a great meeting. It was great discussions surrounding 2 very important subjects: our new innovation park that we're proposing and recreation facilities within our community. And so, without any further ado, thank you very much, and we will see you again at our regularly scheduled council meeting next week. This meeting is adjourned.
Night.